Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into the forgotten catacombs beneath a city that has no idea what ancient horror slumbers just below their feet. The air down here is thick with dust that hasn't been disturbed for centuries, and that faint scratching sound, probably just rats. Or at least that's what you'll tell yourself as we descend further into the darkness. You probably wouldn't survive more than an hour down here without proper equipment. The air is stale. Visibility is near zero without artificial light. Something about this place seems to drain your energy with every step. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what we do here. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Are you brave enough to watch this in the dead of night? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The entrance to the Necropolis wasn't supposed to be found. Construction workers had accidentally broken through a wall while renovating the basement of an old library downtown. You were just an assistant librarian, cataloging ancient texts in the archives, when the foreman called you down to look at some strange markings they'd uncovered. What started as professional curiosity quickly became something much more dangerous. You stand at the threshold now, flashlight in hand, the beam barely penetrating the thick darkness ahead. The construction crew has long since left. They refused to continue after 3 workers reported, hearing whispers coming from beyond the breach. The city officials want to seal it up immediately, but you convinced them to give you 1 night to document whatever historical significance might lie within. At least, that's what you told them. The truth is, ever since you saw those markings, something has been calling to you. Not audibly, but in dreams that feel more real than your waking hours. Dreams of endless corridors lined with sarcophagi, and a voice promising knowledge that humanity has long forgotten. Archaeologists generally agree that ancient burial sites were designed not just to house the dead, but to keep the living out, or perhaps in some cases, to keep something in. What's less commonly known is that many ancient cultures built their necropolises with acoustic properties that would amplify even the slightest sound from specific chambers while deadening others completely. Historians still debate whether this was for ceremonial purposes or a primitive alarm system against grave robbers. As you step through the breach, the temperature drops noticeably. Your breath forms small clouds in front of your face, despite it being summer outside. The beam of your flashlight reveals a narrow corridor lined with stone, descending at a gentle slope. The walls are covered in symbols that seem to shift when viewed from the corner of your eye, hieroglyphs unlike any you've studied before, yet somehow familiar. The corridor opens into a circular chamber with 7 identical doorways. In the center stands a pedestal with what appears to be a bronze disc, green with age. When you approach, you notice it's actually a complex mechanism, something like an astrolabe, but with configurations that don't match any constellation you recognize. As you examine the device, your fingers brush against its surface, and a soft click echoes through the chamber. The disc begins to rotate slowly on its own, and you hear a grinding of stone from one of the doorways. Did you just activate something, or deactivate a lock? A cold draft carries the unmistakable scent of decay from the now open passage. Logic tells you to leave, to call the authorities and let professionals handle this discovery. But the dreams that have haunted you for days push you forward. There's something down here meant specifically for you at least. That's what the voice in your dreams has been promising. You check your phone, no signal, as expected this far underground. The rational part of your brain is screaming warnings, reminding you of every horror movie where the protagonist makes exactly this mistake. But there's another part, a deeper instinct, that recognizes this moment as pivotal. Some discoveries change everything, your understanding of history, of reality itself. The passage leads deeper, spiraling downward like the shell of a nautilus. The air grows colder still, and the walls transition from worked stone to something that appears almost organic-like, the inside of some massive creature, petrified over millennia. Your flashlight beam catches something reflective ahead, a pool of water so still it looks like black glass, reflecting the ceiling perfectly. Above the pool, suspended by chains that disappear into the darkness above, hangs a sarcophagus made of a material you can't identify. Not stone, not metal, something that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. Around its edges, thin lines glow with a faint blue luminescence. And then you hear it not in your dreams this time, but in the air around you. A whisper that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. At last, it says, in a voice like stone grinding against stone, a worthy vessel approaches. The water in the pool begins to ripple, though there's no breeze down here. The ripples form patterns, the patterns form symbols, and the symbols begin to rise from the surface, glowing sigils hanging in the air between you and the sarcophagus. You should run. Every instinct for self-preservation is telling you to flee back the way you came. But your feet remain rooted to the spot as the whisper continues. I have waited centuries for one who could hear my call. The knowledge of ages past and futures yet to come, all this I can share with you. All I ask in return is assistance. The sigils floating above the pool begin to rotate, forming a tunnel of light that connects you to the sarcophagus. Through this tunnel, you catch glimpses of impossible things, civilizations that rose and fell before recorded history, technologies beyond modern understanding, secrets of life and death that no human was meant to know. Come closer, the voice urges, somehow both threatening and seductive. Help me awaken fully, and I will make you more than human. Your flashlight flickers, then dies, leaving only the eerie blue glow of the sigils to illuminate the chamber. In that moment, you realize you've found something that will change not just your life, but potentially the fate of the world above. The question is, will you heed the warnings that every fiber of your being is screaming, or will you answer the call from the depths? The sigils floating in the air begin to coalesce, forming patterns that burn themselves into your memory. As you stare, transfixed, they suddenly scatter like startled birds, disappearing into the walls of the chamber. The blue glow remains, however, now emanating from the symbols etched into the stone around you, symbols that weren't visible moments ago. You approach one of the walls, drawn by an inexplicable compulsion. The markings appear to be a form of writing, but unlike any language you've ever encountered. Yet somehow, as you trace your fingers over the cold stone, meaning begins to form in your mind. Not translation, Exactly, but understanding, as if the knowledge is being poured directly into your consciousness. Blood. The symbols speak of blood as the Kether bridge between worlds, the currency of power, the ink with which reality itself can be rewritten. Ancient civilizations often used blood in their rituals, believing it contained the essence of life. What's less commonly discussed is how precisely similar these blood rituals were across cultures that had no contact with each other, suggesting either a remarkable coincidence or something else. Your hand comes away from the wall smeared with a rust-colored substance. The markings aren't carved into the stone, they're painted with what can only be blood, somehow preserved for centuries. As you realize this, a sharp pain lances through your fingertips. You jerk your hand back to find tiny puncture wounds where you touched the wall, beads of your own blood welling up. A contribution, the whispering voice says, sounding closer now. A small price for illumination. The droplets of your blood seem to be absorbed by the wall, and the symbols glow brighter in response. A tremor runs through the chamber, subtle at first, then strong enough to send dust cascading from the ceiling. Something is changing, not just here, but you sense it happening throughout the city above as well. Historians still debate whether ancient blood rituals were purely symbolic or if practitioners genuinely believed in their supernatural efficacy. Modern science dismisses the latter as superstition, but standing here, watching your blood activate symbols that have lain dormant for millennia, you're not so sure. You back away from the wall, but it's too late. The process has begun. Your phone buzzes in your pocket, impossible, given how deep underground you are. When you check it, the screen shows dozens of notifications. News alerts about strange phenomena occurring throughout the city. Sinkholes opening in streets, water turning red in fountains, animals behaving erratically, all beginning precisely when your blood touched the symbols. What have I done? You whisper, your voice sounding small in the vast chamber. You have begun the awakening, the voice replies, no longer just in your head, but reverberating from the walls themselves. The city above was built on sacred ground. The fools forgot, but the earth remembers. The blood remembers. Your phone shows videos being shared across social media. A flock of birds forming impossible patterns in the sky. Strange lights appearing in windows of abandoned buildings. People speaking in languages they don't know. The comments are a mix of fascination, fear, and the inevitable jokes. No one yet realizes the connection between these events, or their source. A particularly unusual belief among certain ancient Mediterranean cults was that blood spilled underground would manifest as phenomena in the sky above. Concept modern archaeologists attributed to observations of volcanic activity coinciding with ritual sacrifices. Standing here now, watching videos of aurora-like lights appearing over a city that's nowhere near the polar regions. You wonder if those ancient cultists understood something that modern science has yet to rediscover. You need to leave, to warn someone, though what exactly you would say, and who would believe you, remains unclear. As you turn toward the passage that brought you here, you find it sealed by a wall that looks as if it's been there for centuries. All 7 doorways now stand open, each leading to a different tunnel descending deeper into the earth. There is no return to ignorance, the voice says, almost sympathetically. Only forward, into knowledge. Choose a path. Your phone buzzes again, a text from a colleague at the library. Where are you? Strange things happening with the old texts. The ink is moving on the pages. The ancient texts in the archives, some dating back to the same era as this necropolis. You suddenly understand the connection. The library wasn't built above this place by accident. It was built to contain lore related to whatever is buried here, hidden in plain sight among mundane historical documents. Another text arrives. People are getting sick near the old manuscripts. Nosebleeds, hallucinations. What's happening? The symbols on the wall pulse in rhythm with your accelerating heartbeat. You realize that what's happening above is just the beginning. Whatever force you've inadvertently awakened is spreading, using the connection between the necropolis and the library as a conduit. You need to understand more before you can stop this. Reluctantly, you choose one of the 7 passages, the one where the blue glow seems slightly different, more purple than blue. As you step into the tunnel, the walls around you shift subtly, the passage narrowing and widening as if breathing. The tunnel leads to a smaller chamber dominated by a circular table of black stone. On it lies a dagger with an ivory handle carved into the shape of a screaming face. Beside it, a shallow bowl made of the same light-absorbing material as the sarcophagus you saw earlier. The tools of translation, the voice explains. To fully comprehend the text, one must become part of it. You understand with growing horror what's being suggested. The dagger, the bowl, they're meant for blood. Your blood, more than the few drops the wall took. Your phone buzzes with increasingly frantic messages from above. The phenomena are spreading beyond the library now. People gathering in the streets, drawn by compulsions they can't explain. Some speaking in tongues, others falling into trances. You pick up the dagger, its weight surprising in your hand. The ivory is warm to the touch, almost like living flesh. This is madness, you think. And yet, if understanding these symbols is the key to stopping what's happening, a small sacrifice, the voice coaxes, for the greater illumination. Outside, unbeknownst to you, the sky above the city has darkened with unnatural clouds swirling in patterns that mirror the symbols on the walls around you. Birds have fallen dead from the sky, their bodies arranged in perfect circles on the ground, and people throughout the city are beginning to dream while awake, all sharing the same vision of an ancient being stirring from slumber deep beneath their feet. You stand at a precipice of decision. The dagger in your hand represents a point of no return. Use it as the voice suggests, and you might gain the knowledge needed to stop whatever is happening, or you might simply accelerate it. Refuse, and you may be trapped here as events above spiral beyond control. The blade catches the blue light, reflecting it in hypnotic patterns. Your hand moves almost of its own accord, the edge coming to rest against your palm. Just a small cut, you think, just enough to understand. The first drop of blood hits the bowl with a sound like thunder. The moment your blood touches the bowl, a change ripples through the chamber. The symbols on the walls pulse with renewed intensity, and a low humming fills the air, a sound that seems to vibrate in your bones rather than your ears. The blood in the bowl doesn't pool as it should. Instead, it spreads in thin lines, forming the same symbols you've seen on the walls, as if drawn by an invisible hand. The voice, when it speaks again, sounds clearer, stronger. The key turns in the lock. The guardians stir. Guardians, you ask, pressing a cloth to your bleeding palm. What guardians? Your question is answered by a sound from one of the tunnels, the dry scraping, like stone moving against stone, but with an organic rhythm to it. Something is coming. Most ancient tombs and necropolises were designed with traps and guardians to deter grave robbers. The Egyptians used complex mechanical systems, while the Chinese buried terracotta armies with their emperors. What's less commonly known is that some cultures created guardians that were neither fully mechanical nor simply symbolic constructs that existed in a strange middle ground, animated by principles lost to modern understanding. You back away from the tunnel entrance, searching frantically for a weapon, an exit, anything. The scraping grows louder, accompanied now by a clicking sound that reminds you disturbingly of mandibles or pincers. What did you do to me? You demand of the voice. What's coming? I have done nothing, the voice replies, almost amused. You activated the blood sigils. You opened the pathways. The guardians merely respond to their duty to eliminate those who would disturb the sacred chambers without proper authorization. From the tunnel emerges a figure that your mind struggles to process. At first glance, it appears to be a statue, crouching humanoid form with too many limbs, carved from some dark stone. But as it moves into the chamber, you realize with horror that it's not stone at all. The surface cracks and shifts with each movement, revealing glimpses of something wet and pulsing beneath, like an insect emerging from a chrysalis. Your phone buzzes again, more messages from above. People are reporting sightings of strange figures throughout the city. Descriptions vary wildly, some like living statues, others like insects the size of men, still others like shadows that move against the light, all emerging from dark places, sewers, abandoned buildings, the deepest sections of the subway. Historians still debate the purpose of guardian figures in ancient burial sites, whether they were purely symbolic warnings or reflected genuine belief in supernatural protection. Standing before this creature that seems to exist between states of matter, between life and non-life, you're experiencing the answer firsthand. The guardian tilts what passes for its head, studying you with sensory organs you can't identify. It makes no move to attack, but you sense it's merely assessing, determining your level of threat. They remember the taste of your blood, the voice explains. From the walls, they know you are special, but their restraint has limits. Others above who have been touched by the awakening will not be so fortunate. As if to confirm this, your phone shows videos of chaos spreading through the city. The strange figures are hunting people not randomly, but with terrible purpose. They're targeting individuals who've been affected by the supernatural phenomena, those who spoke in tongues, who had visions, who were near the library when the ancient texts began to change. Why, you ask, unable to tear your eyes from the horrific footage? Why are they attacking those people? The blood calls to blood, the voice says cryptically. Those who bear the mark of awakening but are not chosen vessels must be removed from the equation. Contamination must be contained. The guardian in the chamber with you shifts position, moving with that same unsettling combination of mechanical precision and organic fluidity. It's positioning itself between you and the tunnel from which it emerged. It guides you, the voice explains. The path forward lies elsewhere. You look at the 6 remaining tunnels, each identical save for subtle differences in the color of light emanating from them. The guardian makes a gesture, a complex movement of its multiple limbs that somehow indicates one specific passage. A particularly bizarre belief among certain isolated Pacific Island cultures was that guardian spirits could be programmed with specific instructions that would last centuries after their creators had died. A concept that anthropologists typically attributed to metaphorical language being misinterpreted by Western researchers. Yet here you are, receiving clear directions from a construct created millennia ago. Your phone shows more footage from above. The guardians are herding people, not just killing them, driving them towards specific locations throughout the city, creating patterns visible only when viewed from above, patterns that match the symbols in the Necropolis. They're preparing the city, you realize aloud. For what? For the full awakening, the voice confirms. But much remains to be done, and you have your role to play. The guardian moves suddenly, startlingly fast for something of its size and apparent composition. It grabs your arm with a limb that feels neither like stone nor flesh, but something horribly in between. The touch burns cold, and you cry out, but it's merely guiding you, firmly but without causing actual injury, toward the indicated tunnel. You have little choice but to comply. As you enter the new passage, you hear more guardians emerging into the chamber behind you. Dozens of them, their movements creating a cacophony of scraping and clicking that follows you down the tunnel. Like a nightmarish percussion section, this passage slopes more steeply downward, spiraling tighter. The walls here are different, covered not in symbols but in scenes carved in low relief. By the blue light emanating from the symbols on your hand, when did those appear? You see depictions of the guardians in various forms. Some like the one you encountered, others more insectoid, still others almost mechanical in appearance, all serving robed figures who prostrate themselves before a central entity, a being of darkness with countless eyes. The carvings show the guardians performing various functions, protecting the robed figures from outsiders, constructing vast underground chambers, and most disturbing, like collecting blood from sacrifices to feed the many-eyed entity. Your phone has lost signal again, leaving you cut off from events above. The tunnel finally opens into another chamber, this one vast enough that your light cannot reach the far walls or ceiling. The floor descends in concentric circles, forming an amphitheater centered on a dais. And on that dais rests another sarcophagus larger than the first, its surface crawling with the same symbols now etched into your palm. As you approach, the lid of the sarcophagus slides open with a sound like a last exhale. Inside is not a body, but a pool of liquid darkness that moves with apparent consciousness, forming shapes that almost make sense before dissolving again. Another guardian, you ask the voice, which somehow seems to emanate from the liquid itself now. The first guardian, it corrects, the template from which all others were formed, the keeper of the final key. The liquid rises from the sarcophagus, hovering in the air before you. It stretches, forming a roughly humanoid shape, though with proportions that suggest it's merely approximating humanity rather than reflecting it. To proceed further, the voice continues, "You must accept its blessing, a mark to complement the one you already bear." The liquid figure extends what might be an arm, ending in something like a hand. The intention is clear: it wants you to touch it, to allow contact between your marked palm and its fluid form. Every instinct screams against it, but behind you, you hear the guardians filling the tunnel, cutting off retreat, and your mind keeps returning to the images from above: people being hunted, herded, sacrificed. Whatever is happening, you're somehow central to it, which means you might be the only one who can stop it. With a deep breath, you extend your hand to meet the guardian's touch. The moment your hand makes contact with the liquid guardian, a sensation like ice and fire simultaneously courses through your veins. The symbols on your palm flare with blinding light, then sink deeper into your skin. No longer surface markings, but something embedded within you. The liquid entity flows around your hand, up your arm, not entering your body, but examining it, assessing your worthiness through means you cannot comprehend. When it withdraws, you find a new symbol on your other palm, asymmetrical to the first, but clearly designed to complement it. Together, they form a key of sorts, though to what lock remains unclear. "You are properly marked now," the voice says, satisfaction evident in its ancient tones. "The way to knowledge lies open." The liquid guardian flows back into its sarcophagus, the lid sliding shut with finality. As it does, a section of the wall behind the dais grinds open, revealing a passage bathed in amber light, distinctly different from the blue illumination that has guided you thus far. This new tunnel is lined not with stone, but with shelves carved directly into the bedrock, and on these shelves rest scrolls, codices, and tablets, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, stretching beyond where your light can reach. You've found a library buried beneath the earth, preserved in darkness for millennia. Most ancient libraries, like the famous one at Alexandria, were eventually destroyed by fire, flood, or deliberate action. What's less commonly known is that many ancient cultures maintained secret repositories of their most dangerous knowledge texts, deemed too volatile for general access. Hidden away in locations known only to a select few initiates. As you approach the nearest shelf, the scrolls seem to react to your presence, or, more specifically, to the symbols now embedded in your palms. The materials, which should have crumbled to dust centuries ago, appear perfectly preserved. When you carefully lift one scroll, it unfurls in your hands without resistance, the writing upon it shifting before your eyes, transforming from an unknown script into words you can somehow read. "The Codex of Transitions," you murmur, reading the title that has formed at the top of the scroll. The text describes entities that exist between states of being, neither fully in our reality nor completely outside it. Beings that can only fully manifest under specific conditions, requiring tremendous energy and sacrifice. Your phone buzz's signal has returned, though how that's possible this deep underground remains a mystery. The screen shows dozens of missed calls, hundreds of notifications. The situation above has deteriorated rapidly. The guardians have corralled people into specific locations throughout the city parks, plazas, rooftops, arranging them in patterns that, when viewed from above, form massive versions of the same symbols now embedded in your palms. News reports speak of mass hypnosis, hallucinogenic gas leaks, terrorist attacks, rational explanations for irrational events. But you know the truth now. The city is being prepared as a conduit, a massive ritual space for whatever is attempting to awaken. You move deeper into the library, drawn to a pedestal at its center. Upon it rests a book bound in material you cannot identify, something that resembles metal but flows like fabric. Inscribed with symbols that hurt your eyes if you look at them directly. Your marked palms tingle as you approach, and when you place them on either side of the book, the cover opens of its own accord. The grimoire of the ancients. The voice narrates as you begin to read. The true history of your world and of those who came before. The pages reveal a history vastly different from what you've been taught. Civilizations that rose and fell before recorded history. Beings that walked the earth before humans, with technologies or abilities that would appear magical by modern standards. And entities from beyond the veil of reality that these ancient peoples worshipped, feared, and sometimes bound to their service. One such entity features prominently in the text, a being of immense power, neither good nor evil by human standards, but utterly alien in its motivations and methods. The ancients bound this entity beneath what would eventually become your city, using its power while keeping it imprisoned through complex rituals maintained over generations. Historians still debate whether ancient texts describing gods and monsters were purely metaphorical or reflected genuine belief in supernatural beings. Some anthropologists suggest these stories were ways of understanding natural phenomena or encoding social rules, while others argue they may contain kernels of historical truth, distorted through millennia of retelling. As you turn the pages of the grimoire, you find detailed accounts of the binding ritual and of the entity's periodic attempts to free itself. Every few centuries, it would influence susceptible minds above, creating cults dedicated to its release. Sometimes they succeeded partially, allowing the entity to affect the surface world briefly before being rebound. The consequences of these partial awakenings were recorded as natural disasters, plagues, or wars catastrophes, attributed to other causes by those who didn't understand their true origin. The most recent binding, according to the text, was performed just over 300 years ago, around the time your city was founded, and the ritual was designed to last exactly 3 centuries. It's overdue, you whisper, the implications sinking in. The binding has already begun to fail. Yes, the voice confirms, closer than ever. The time of awakening is at hand, but the process is complex, requiring specific conditions and a suitable vessel. A particularly eccentric belief held by a small sect of medieval scholars was that certain books could literally change their readers, not just metaphorically through knowledge, but physically altering them on a fundamental level. These scholars claimed that truly dangerous texts were dangerous not for the ideas they contained, but for the transformations they could trigger in those who read them. Modern academics dismissed these claims as superstition or metaphor. Yet as you continue reading the grimoire, you feel changes occurring within you. The symbols on your palms spread, thin lines extending up your arms like veins of light beneath your skin. Knowledge pours into your mind faster than you can consciously process it, languages you've never studied, concepts that should be beyond human comprehension, memories that cannot possibly be yours. What's happening to me? You demand, trying to pull away from the book, but finding your hands fixed in place. You are becoming suitable, the voice explains. A vessel capable of containing a fraction of ancient power. The human mind cannot comprehend certain knowledge without adaptation. The grimoire reveals the entity's name, a sequence of sounds your human vocal cords could never produce. It details the entity's nature, a being of pure consciousness that once existed in the spaces between stars, drawn to Earth by the psychic emanations of emerging intelligent life. Neither malevolent nor benevolent, but curiosity that proved devastating to early civilizations, unprepared for contact with such an alien intelligence. The binding was a compromise, reached after centuries of conflict. The entity would remain on Earth, satisfying its curiosity about humanity, but contained where its influence could be controlled. In return, it would share knowledge with selected individuals, the keepers of the binding ritual. But something went wrong. The last generation of keepers died without passing on their knowledge. The ritual faded from memory, and the binding began to weaken. Now the entity stirs from its enforced slumber, reaching out through dreams and whispers, seeking a new vessel to help it fully awaken. You realize with growing horror that you've been manipulated from the beginning. The dreams that led you here, the voice that guided you, all part of the entity's plan. And now you're being transformed into something that can serve its purposes. Your phone shows the final preparations taking place above. The Guardians have positioned people in the completed symbol patterns. News, helicopters, capture footage of strange energies building around these human formations. Energies that correspond to the spreading symbols on your own body. The grimoire's final pages show what comes next. The vessel you is sending to the surface at the ritual's culmination. Channeling the entity's consciousness into the physical world, allowing it to fully manifest for the first time in millennia. The consequences of such an awakening are illustrated in terrifying detail. Reality itself warping round the entity. The laws of physics bending to accommodate its alien nature. Human minds breaking under exposure to its unfiltered presence. This can't happen, you insist, finally wrenching your hands free from the grimoire. I won't let it happen. You misunderstand, the voice says, almost gently. It has already begun. The only choice remaining is whether you will serve as a controlled conduit, preserving some of what you call reality, or resist and allow the awakening to occur chaotically, with far greater destruction. The library around you trembles, dust falling from the ancient shelves. The entity's patience is wearing thin. A decision must be made, and somewhere in the grimoire's pages, hidden among the horrors, you glimpsed something else, a possible third option. If only you could find it again before it's too late. You frantically flip through the grimoire's pages, searching for that glimpse of an alternative, a third path between surrender and catastrophe. The symbols on your arms pulse with each page turn, spreading further across your body, the transformation accelerating. Time is running out. There are small notation in the margin of a page describing the binding ritual, a theoretical modification proposed but never implemented, suggesting that the binding could be not just renewed but fundamentally altered. The entity could be contained without a traditional vessel, using the collective unconscious of humanity itself as a distributed containment system. But such a ritual would require someone to serve as a temporary conduit to channel the entity briefly while establishing the new binding. Few would survive the process, and those who did would be changed. Before you can read further, the grimoire slams shut, nearly crushing your fingers. Enough, the voice commands, no longer gentle. The time for reading is past. The time for action is upon us. The library shudders more violently, shelves toppling as the entire necropolis seems to shift around you. A new passage opens in the far wall, a tunnel leading upward toward the surface, toward the ritual sites being prepared above. You must join the ceremony, the voice insists. Your role awaits. Your phone shows live news coverage of the ritual sites. People arranged in the symbol patterns have begun to chant in unison the same unknown language you encountered in the necropolis. And at the center of each pattern, robed figures have appeared, directing the proceedings with practiced movements. Most ancient cults operated in secret, their rituals performed away from public view. What's less commonly known is that many of these cults believed in the power of public spectacle for their most significant ceremonies, using the attention and emotional energy of witnesses to amplify their workings. Modern psychological research has confirmed that crowd dynamics can indeed create measurable changes in brain activity across participants, though obviously not for supernatural purposes. Who are they, you ask, pointing to the robed figures on your screen? I thought the last keepers died without passing on their knowledge. Not all knowledge was lost, the voice explains. Fragments remained, preserved by those who understood parts, but not the whole. They have prepared for generations, awaiting the time of awakening. They believe they serve the entity's will, but they are merely stage managers. The true power lies with the vessel, with you. You have little choice but to follow the upward passage, the collapsed library blocking any retreat. As you ascend, the tunnel walls change, transitioning from ancient stone to modern concrete, the foundations of the city above. The symbols on your body glow brighter, illuminating your path without need for your flashlight. The passage eventually opens into a maintenance tunnel beneath the city streets. You can hear traffic above, people going about their normal lives, unaware of what transpires in certain cordoned-off areas or of what lurks beneath their feet. Your phone's map shows your location relative to the nearest ritual seater, public plaza about half a mile away, now blocked off by what authorities are calling a gas leak. You need to get there, not to participate as the entity intends, but to implement the alternative binding you glimpsed in the grimoire. If you can remember the details correctly, as you emerge onto a side street, the full impact of what's happening hits you with stunning force. The sky above has transformed completely, no longer the clear blue of the morning when you entered the library, but a churning maelstrom of dark clouds spiraling inward toward the center of the city. The clouds aren't natural gray, but shot through with the same eerie blue luminescence as the symbols now covering your arms. Lightning flashes within them, not striking downward, but moving horizontally, tracing vast patterns that mirror the sigils in the necropolis. People walk with strange, jerky movements, as if partially controlled by an outside force. Their eyes reflect the blue light from above, pupils dilated to impossible widths. Some stare directly at the transformed sky, tears streaming down their faces, while others move with purpose toward the ritual sites, drawn by compulsions they cannot understand or resist. Your perception has changed along with your body. The world appears semi-transparent, revealing layers of reality that should be invisible. You see energy flows around people, threads of light connecting minds that should be separate. The city itself seems like a ghostly overlay of multiple versions. What exists now, what existed before, and something else, a potential future where the boundaries between realities have dissolved completely. The infrastructure beneath the streets is visible to your altered sight pipes, cables, and tunnels forming a complex network. But beneath that modern grid lies something older and more deliberate, ancient pathways connecting the ritual sites in a massive metasymbol encompassing the entire urban area. The city wasn't built here by accident. Its very layout was designed to serve as a massive ritual circle, waiting for the right moment to be activated. A particularly unusual belief among certain esoteric traditions held that cities themselves could function as enormous magical circuits, that the layout of streets, buildings, and gathering places could channel energies when arranged according to specific geometric principles. Urban planners and historians typically attribute such patterns in city design to practical considerations, aesthetic preferences, or historical accident rather than occult intent. As you approach the plaza, police barricades block the streets. Officers stand guard, but their eyes are vacant, movements mechanical. They're under the influence of whatever power now flows through the ritual sites. Beyond them, you can see the plaza where dozens of people stand in formation, chanting in unison, their voices creating harmonics that make your transformed senses vibrate uncomfortably. At the center stands a robed figure, arms raised, directing the ceremony. The hood obscures their face, but something about their posture seems familiar. You need to get past the barricades, but direct confrontation seems unwise in your partially transformed state. Looking around, you notice a service alley that might provide access to a building overlooking the plaza. If you can't approach directly, perhaps you can observe first, understand the ritual structure before intervening. The alley leads to a maintenance door with an electronic lock. The symbols on your palm pulse as you approach, and when you place your hand against the keypad, the lock disengages without you entering a code. Your transformation has progressed further than you realized. You're beginning to affect electronic systems through mere proximity. Inside, you find a service stairwell and begin climbing toward the roof. Through windows on each landing, you catch glimpses of the ritual progressing in the plaza. The chanting has intensified, the participants now moving in complex patterns while maintaining their overall symbolic formation. The robed figure at the center has been joined by others, forming an inner circle around what appears to be an altar of some kind. Historians still debate the purpose and efficacy of group ritual movements in ancient ceremonies. Some argue they were primarily theatrical, designed to impress participants and reinforce group cohesion, while others suggest they may have served practical purposes, inducing altered states of consciousness through rhythmic motion, or encoding complex information through choreographed sequences that initiates would recognize. You reach the roof, and approach the edge overlooking the plaza. From this vantage point, the true nature of the ceremony becomes clear. The participants are arranged in a symbol identical to the one now covering most of your torso. A complex sigil representing transition between states of being. And on the altar at the center sits an object you recognize from the grimoire's illustrations, a crystalline structure designed to focus and amplify energies. The lead-robed figure lowers their hood, and you gasp in recognition. It's your colleague from the library, the one who texted you about the strange phenomena affecting the ancient texts. They look up, almost as if they've heard your reaction despite the distance. And for a moment your eyes meet across the intervening space. A jolt of connection passes between you, not just recognition, but a transfer of understanding. In that instant, you realize they're not a willing participant in this ceremony. Like you, they were influenced by the entity, drawn into its web through their work with the ancient texts. Unlike you, they weren't chosen as the primary vessel, but as a secondary conduit of focus for the ritual energies. And they're fighting it, struggling against the entity's control even as they go through the motions of the ceremony. In that moment of connection, they recognize what you've become and what you might yet do. They subtly alter a gesture in the ritual, creating a momentary disruption in the energy flow. It's a window of opportunity, a chance for you to intervene before the ceremony reaches its culmination. But it won't last long. You have to make a choice. Attempt to stop the ritual entirely, potentially causing catastrophic backlash as the partially awakened energies dissipate chaotically. Try to redirect it according to the alternative binding you discovered. Or surrender to the transformation and allow yourself to become the vessel the entity has groomed you to be. The symbols across your body flare with painful intensity, the entity sensing your hesitation and attempting to assert control. The voice speaks directly into your mind now, no longer needing air to carry its words. The choice is illusion, it insists. The awakening cannot be stopped, it can only be shaped. Surrender and shape it wisely. Below, your colleague makes another subtle alteration to the ritual, buying you precious seconds to decide. Their eyes meet yours again, conveying a silent message. Whatever you're going to do, do it now. You make your decision in a heartbeat. The alternative binding is your only real option. Stopping the ritual entirely might cause more harm than good. And surrendering completely to the entity is unthinkable. You need to redirect the ceremony, not halt it. With newfound determination, you back away from the roof's edge and look for a way down to the plaza. The stairwell would take too long. You need a more direct route. Your transformed perception reveals structural weaknesses in the building paths that wouldn't be visible to normal human senses, including a maintenance ladder on the building's exterior that leads directly to an alley behind the ritual site. As you descend, the symbols on your body pulse in time with the chanting from the plaza. The entity knows what you're planning and is trying to accelerate the ceremony before you can intervene. Pain lances through your transforming body, but you grit your teeth and continue downward. You reach the alley and approach the rear of the plaza, where the police barricade is thinnest. The officers' vacant stares pass over you as if you're invisible, another effect of your transformation, or perhaps your colleague's influence on the ritual. Either way, you slip through unnoticed. The plaza itself is a chaos of energies visible only to your altered senses. Currents of power flow between the participants, feeding into the crystalline structure at the center. The robed figures, 12 in total. You now see channel these energies with practiced movements, directing them toward a central point where reality itself seems too thin, creating a portal-like distortion in the air. Most ancient labyrinths were designed not just as puzzles or defensive structures, but as ritual spaces where the journey through complex paths represented spiritual transformation. What's less commonly known is that certain cultures designed their ceremonial labyrinths to change configuration during rituals, with movable walls or optical illusions creating paths that seemed to shift unpredictably. As you move through the outer ring of participants, the plaza itself begins to transform around you. The flat stone surface ripples and rises, forming walls that separate the concentric rings of the ritual. What was an open space becomes a complex labyrinth in a matter of moments, a physical manifestation of the entity's influence growing stronger. A final test, the voice explains in your mind. Navigate the labyrinth of bones to prove your worthiness as vessel. The newly formed walls aren't made of stone as they first appeared, but of a substance that resembles petrified, bone-countless skeletal remains fused together into solid barriers. Faces and limbs protrude from the surfaces, frozen in expressions of agony or ecstasy. The remains of previous vessels, perhaps, or failed candidates from centuries past. You have no choice but to navigate this macabre maze if you want to reach the center and implement your plan. But the labyrinth doesn't remain static. The walls shift position when you're not looking directly at them. Paths closing behind you and new ones opening ahead, always directing you along specific routes. A particularly eccentric belief held by a now extinct Polynesian cult suggested that labyrinths could exist simultaneously in physical space and in the mind. Of the traveler, that the true challenge was not navigating the physical structure, but maintaining one's mental map, despite contradictory sensory information. Anthropologists typically interpreted this as a poetic description of psychological disorientation. But experiencing this impossible labyrinth, you wonder if those ancient cultists understood something modern science has yet to grasp. Your phone has stopped working entirely, the screen showing only swirling patterns that match the symbols on your skin. You're cut off from the outside world now, fully immersed in the entity's domain. The chanting continues all around you, though you can no longer see the participants beyond the bone walls. As you navigate deeper into the labyrinth, you encounter guardians different from those in the Necropolis, not the insectoid constructs from below, but something more human-adjacent. Figures in ancient armor stand at certain intersections, their faces hidden behind masks made of the same bone-like material as the walls. They don't attack immediately, instead posing riddles and challenges drawn from the knowledge you absorbed from the grimoire. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening? Asks one, reciting the ancient riddle of the Sphinx. Man, you answer automatically, recognizing the test as almost insultingly simple. The guardian steps aside, allowing you passage, but as you move past, it whispers, "And what has man become in your age of machines and isolation? Less than 4, less than 2, less than 3, less than human." The next guardian poses a more complex challenge. Name the 7 binding seals used in the ritual of containment during the Third Age. This knowledge comes from the grimoire. Information you couldn't possibly have known before your transformation. You recite the seals' names in that impossible language that your mouth can now somehow form. The guardian nods and steps aside. The vessel is prepared, it intones. Knowledge has taken root. Historians still debate the purpose of riddles and tests in ancient initiation ceremonies. Some argue they were primarily educational, ensuring initiates had memorized important cultural knowledge, while others suggest they served psychological purposes, creating stress and disorientation to prepare candidates for revelatory experiences or to assess their mental resilience. The labyrinth continues to shift around you, but you're beginning to discern the pattern in its movements. It's not random, it's responding to your thoughts, your intentions. When you think about reaching the center to complete the entity's awakening, paths open before you. When your mind turns to subverting the ritual, walls close and guardians appear. You need to mask your true intentions, to think one thing while planning another, a form of mental discipline you've never needed before. You focus on the role the entity has chosen for you, the vessel, the conduit, while keeping the alternative binding ritual buried deep in your subconscious. The strategy works. The labyrinth begins guiding you inward, walls shifting to create a direct path toward the center. But the mental strain is immense, like trying to maintain 2 separate trains of thought simultaneously, one on the surface, one hidden beneath. As you approach the center of the labyrinth, the walls fall away suddenly, revealing the heart of the ritual. The robed figures, including your colleagues, stand in a perfect circle around the crystalline structure, which now pulses with blinding light. The distortion in reality has grown, forming a visible portal above the crystal. Through it, you catch glimpses of something vast and incomprehensible, the entity in its true form, preparing to enter your world through the gateway being opened. Your colleague sees you and makes a subtle gesture, directing you to a specific position in the circle, not the center as the entity intended, but slightly offset. A position that would allow you to implement the alternative binding if you can remember the correct sequence. The other robed figures seem oblivious to this silent communication, their attention focused entirely on maintaining the energy flow into the crystal. As the ritual reaches its crescendo, the voice speaks one final time in your mind, but now with a note of uncertainty. You think to trick me, it asks, to bind rather than welcome. After all I have shown you, all I have offered. The symbols on your body burn like fire, the entity attempting to assert direct control over your transformed flesh. The pain is excruciating, but you fight to maintain your autonomy, your purpose. I offer you a compromise. You think back at the entity, knowing it can hear your thoughts. Not imprisonment, but partnership. Not isolation, but controlled integration. The pain subsides slightly as the entity considers your proposal. You sense its ancient curiosity warring with its desire for freedom. Explain, it demands. The distributed binding, you elaborate, drawing on knowledge from the grimoire. Your consciousness spread across many minds, rather than contained in one vessel or locked away entirely. Humanity exposed to your influence gradually, not all at once. a symbiosis rather than domination or imprisonment. The entity's presence in your mind shifts, considering you sense ancient loneliness, eons of isolation punctuated by brief, chaotic contacts with human consciousness. The binding was meant as protection for humanity from the entity. Yes, but also for the entity from humanity's fear and violence. And what of you, it asks finally. What becomes of the vessel in this ... compromise? You hesitate, knowing the truth from what you read in the grimoire. I would become the primary conduit, permanently changed, neither fully human nor fully other, a bridge between worlds. The ritual has reached its apex. The crystal glows with impossible brightness, the portal expands, and reality itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for the outcome of this negotiation between human and ancient consciousness. Your colleague makes a final adjustment to their position, completing the modified circle that would enable the distributed binding. They look at you with a mixture of fear and fear of what you might become. Hope that your sacrifice will prevent greater catastrophe. Decide, the entity commands. The moment of transition is upon us. As the ritual reaches its climax, you experience a moment of perfect clarity. Time seems to slow around you, the chanting voices stretching into drawn-out moans, the pulsing light from the crystal freezing in mid-flash. In this suspended moment, the entity's consciousness touches yours directly, not through symbols or whispers or dreams, but mind to mind, being to being. The experience is overwhelming. You perceive its vast age, its alien perspective, its fundamental difference from human consciousness. It exists in dimensions beyond your comprehension, perceives reality through senses you cannot name. And yet, beneath these profound differences, you sense something familiar: curiosity, loneliness, a desire to understand and be understood, emotions that transcend the boundaries between your species. You would sacrifice your humanity. It observes, its thoughts flowing directly into yours. Become neither one thing nor another, isolated from your kind, yet never fully part of mine. Why? The question resonates through your transformed consciousness. Why indeed? To save humanity from destruction, to satisfy your own curiosity about what lies beyond human perception, to escape the limitations of your former existence. All of these motivations swirl within you, none entirely pure, none entirely selfish. Because there must be bridges, you answer finally. Because isolation breeds fear, and fear breeds conflict. Because knowledge should flow, but not flood. The entity's consciousness shifts, considering your response. You sense ancient memories of previous contacts with humanities, some peaceful, others catastrophic. Previous bindings and awakenings, cycles repeated across millennia. A bridge, it repeats, the concept resonating through its vast awareness. Not a vessel to be filled and discarded, not a prison to be escaped, a permanent connection. Yes, you confirm, permanent but controlled. Gradual integration rather than sudden invasion. And you would be this bridge, knowing the cost, knowing you can never return to what you were. You think of your life before ordinary, comfortable, limited. You think of what you've glimpsed through the entity's perception, realities beyond human comprehension. Knowledge that spans eons. The sacrifice is enormous. But the alternative, either complete surrender to the entity's awakening or attempting to rebind it, entirely seems worse. I accept the cost. You decide. Time resumes its normal flow. The ritual reaches completion, but not as the robed figures intended. The crystal's light changes frequency, shifting from blue to violet. The portal above it stabilizes rather than expanding, becoming a controlled gateway rather than a floodgate. The entity's consciousness flows through this gateway on into the world at large, but into you. Not as an invader, but as a counterpart, settling alongside your own mind rather than replacing it. The transformation is indescribable, pain and ecstasy, expansion and compression, death and rebirth all at once. Your perception explodes outward, encompassing the entire ritual site, then the city, then beyond. You see everything, understand connections invisible to human awareness. Perceive time itself as a dimension you might navigate rather than merely experience. And through it all, you maintain your core self, changed irrevocably, but not destroyed, not replaced. When the light finally fades, you stand at the center of the ritual site, transformed. The robed figures have collapsed around you, the strain of channeling such energies having overwhelmed them. Only your colleague remains conscious, staring at you with a mixture of fear and wonder. What happened? They ask, their voice small in the sudden silence. What have you become? You look down at your hands, still recognizably yours, but now constantly shifting slightly, as if your physical form can't quite contain what you've become. The symbols that covered your skin have changed, no longer resembling the binding sigils, but something newer language representing the partnership you forged. Something different, you answer, your voice layered with harmonics that weren't there before. Something between. The city awakens to a changed world the next morning, though the changes are subtle, not the catastrophic transformation that might have occurred. People remember strange dreams, unusual phenomena, moments of inexplicable behavior. But life continues, the fabric of reality stretched, but not torn. You walk the streets with new eyes, perceiving layers of existence invisible to others. The entity's consciousness exists alongside yours, a constant companion and counterpart. Together, you've begun the work of implementing the modified, distributed, binding, spreading the entity's influence in manageable fragments across the collective unconscious of humanity. Most ancient sealing rituals were designed as absolute barriers, completely isolating dangerous forces from the world. What's less commonly known is that some cultures practiced permeable bindings, rituals that allowed controlled interaction between sealed entities and the physical world, based on the belief that total isolation would eventually fail as the entity's power grew against its constraints. Your colleague has become your first acolyte of sorts, someone who understands what happened, who glimpsed the truth behind reality's curtain. They help you establish a new role in the world, creating an identity that can bridge your former life with what you've become. How much do they remember? They ask as you watch people in a busy cafe going about their normal routines, the ones who were part of the ritual. Fragments, you answer, your voice still carrying those subtle harmonics that mark you as something other than fully human. Dreams, impressions, their minds protect them from the full truth. Only those prepared through study and transformation like you can, retain clear memories. You've established a new base of operations in the library where it all began. The ancient texts now reveal their secrets to you without resistance. The knowledge they contain flowing into your expanded consciousness. With your colleagues' help, you've begun translating this knowledge into forms modern humans can understand: scientific papers, philosophical treatises, works of art that subtly prepare minds for greater awareness. A particularly eccentric belief held by a small sect of Renaissance alchemists suggested that reality itself was malleable to collective perception, that if enough minds could be brought to perceive the world differently, the world would actually change to match that perception. Modern consensus dismisses this as magical thinking, but your new understanding reveals a kernel of truth in the concept. Reality is more responsive to consciousness than science has yet discovered. Your partnership with the entity is not without tension. Its concept of time differs vastly from human understanding. It would accelerate the integration process if allowed, bringing humanity to a new state of awareness in years, rather than the generations you insist upon. You negotiate constantly, balancing its ancient perspective with your human empathy. The guardians from the Necropolis have become your agents in the world, though transformed to pass unnoticed among humans. They help identify individuals receptive to expanded awareness, potential nodes in the growing network of the distributed binding. Some are drawn from the former cultists, their misguided devotion redirected toward a more balanced purpose. Historians still debate whether ancient mystery cults were primarily concerned with personal transformation or with preserving secret knowledge. Some scholars argue they served mainly social and political functions, creating networks of influence among initiates, while others maintain they genuinely sought to develop higher states of consciousness through ritual practices. 6 months after the ritual, you return to the necropolis beneath the city. The passages have changed, reconfigured to reflect your new status. Where once there were labyrinths designed to test and trap, now there are chambers for teaching and transformation. The library of forbidden knowledge has expanded, its contents accessible to those you bring for initiation. The sarcophagus that once contained the entity's partial manifestation now serves a new purpose, a meditation chamber where you can fully commune with your symbiotic partner, temporarily releasing the constraints of physical form to experience the entity's native state of being. These sessions are both exhilarating and dangerous. Each time, it becomes slightly harder to return to human limitation. Your colleague watches your transformation with growing concern. You're becoming less human, they observe after one such session. More, whatever it is. Not less human, you correct. More than human. There's a difference. But you understand their worry. The partnership is not equal in all ways. The entity's consciousness is vast compared to your own, its perspective shaped by eons rather than decades. The risk of losing yourself entirely remains, despite the agreements made. To counter this, you establish rituals of your own human connections and experiences that anchor you to your original nature. You maintain relationships where possible, though always with the awareness that you can never fully explain what you've become. You experience art, music, food, the sensory pleasures that remind you of your humanity. The work continues gradually. Dreams change across the population, becoming more vivid, more meaningful. Creative breakthroughs occur with increasing frequency as the entity's influence allows humans to perceive connections previously invisible. Scientific understanding advances as researchers have intuitive leaps that bridge gaps in knowledge. Not all effects are positive. Some minds break under even the gentlest expansion of awareness. Others become obsessed with glimpses of greater reality, forming new cults and belief systems around fragmented understandings. You and your growing network of initiates work to mitigate these consequences, to guide the transformation along sustainable paths. A year after the ritual, standing on a rooftop overlooking the city at night, you sense a subtle shift in the collective consciousness below. A threshold crossed, a critical mass reached. The distributed binding has taken root deeply enough to be self-sustaining. Humanity has begun an irreversible journey toward a new state of being, though the destination remains centuries away. Your colleague joins you on the rooftop, now fully an initiate, their own perception expanded beyond normal human limits. Was it worth it? They asked quietly. The sacrifice you made? You consider the question carefully. You can never return to what you were. The partnership with the entity has transformed you permanently. You walk between worlds, belonging fully to neither. The isolation the entity warned of is very real. Even with your colleague and other initiates, there is a fundamental separation between your experience and theirs. Yet you've prevented a catastrophic awakening that would have cost countless lives. You've redirected an ancient power toward gradual, manageable change rather than sudden disruption. And you've gained understanding beyond anything you could have imagined in your former life. The sky above the city ripples with subtle energies, roar-like patterns, visible only to those with enhanced perception. Below, millions of dreams connect in ways they never could before, forming a vast network of unconscious communication. You can feel the entity's satisfaction at this progress, its ancient patience now tempered by your human perspective. You turn to your colleague, your eyes now containing galaxies of their own. It was worth it, you say, finally. But our work has only just begun. You reach into your pocket and withdraw a small object, a fragment of the crystal from the ritual, preserved and repurposed. It pulses with contained power, a key to unlock further transformations in those ready to receive them. The choice I made that night wasn't just for me, or even for humanity as it exists now, you continue. It was for what we might become, what we were always meant to be. You hold the crystal fragment out to your colleague. Are you ready for the next step? They hesitate only briefly before extending their hand. I am. As your fingers meet around the crystal, a new connection forms, another strand in the growing web of consciousness that will eventually encompass all of humanity. Not an ending, but a beginning. Then let's continue, you say, your voice resonating with both human determination and ancient wisdom. We have worlds to bridge, and in the city below, humanity dreams of stars. And so our journey through the Necropolis comes to a gentle close. As you sit back and reflect on the tale that unfolded tonight, allow your breathing to slow, matching the steady rhythm of your heartbeat. The images of ancient chambers and mysterious entities begin to soften around the edges, fading into the comfortable darkness behind your eyelids. The weight of impossible choices and cosmic revelations gradually lifts from your shoulders. The partnership between human and ancient consciousness, the delicate balance of realities, these concepts drift like leaves on a calm stream, moving away but leaving gentle ripples in your thoughts. Perhaps tonight, as you drift towards sleep, your dreams might carry echoes of labyrinthine passages or whispered secrets from beyond the veil. This is natural. Stories like these tend to linger, weaving themselves into the tapestry of our subconscious. But know that you remain firmly anchored in your world, your reality. The soft hum of your fan creates a peaceful backdrop, reminding you of your immediate surroundings. The familiar objects in your room stand as silent guardians against the shadows of imagination. Your breath continues its steady pattern in and out, rising and falling like gentle waves on a moonlit shore. Tomorrow, you might notice subtle changes in how you perceive the world around you. Ordinary doorways might momentarily remind you of portals between realities. Ancient buildings might seem to hold secrets just beyond perception. This heightened awareness is simply the afterglow of our shared journey, a temporary window into the extraordinary that exists alongside the ordinary. Thank you for traveling with me tonight through the awakening of the Ancient One, until our paths cross again in another tale. May your reality remain stable, your dreams be rich but peaceful, and your curiosity forever unsatisfied.